Imagine being home alone, enjoying a quiet night, when suddenly the doorbell rings. No one is there. Moments later, 3 loud knocks echo through the silence. You check again, but this time someone is watching. Or maybe it's a phone call. Anonymous, relentless. The caller knows your name, your secrets. They're close, too close. And what if you found a mysterious package on your doorstep, keys to an unknown place, a note with a time, and a picture of your own home taken the night before? These are real stories, disturbing, unexplained, and utterly terrifying. Tonight, we dive into the horrifying accounts of people who lived through their worst nightmares. Before we begin, make sure to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our spine-chilling stories. Now, are you ready? Because once you hear these stories, you might never sleep the same way again. Story 1. The man under the bed. I've been living in this old house for about a year now, and I've always liked it, even though it's kind of creepy sometimes. It's one of those narrow 2-story places with peeling gray paint and a sagging front porch that groans when you step on it. The windows are tall and skinny, always rattling when the wind picks up, and the whole place smells like damp wood and something sour I can't quite place. My roommate's been gone for 2 weeks, and I've been loving having the house to myself, sprawling out on the couch with pizza and binge-watching shows until way too late. That night, I was halfway through some dumb reality show when the doorbell rang out of nowhere. It was past midnight, and I wasn't expecting anyone. My stomach did this little flip, but I figured it was just some drunk neighbor or a delivery guy who got the wrong address. I dragged myself up, still clutching the remote, and shuffled to the door, the floorboards creaking under my socks. When I peeked through the peephole, I saw this faint blur of movement, like someone stepping back, but no one was there. Just the empty porch, lit up by that flickering yellow bulb we've been too lazy to fix. I stood there for a sec, heart thumping, a little harder than I'd like to admit, telling myself it was nothing. Maybe kids messing around or the wind knocking something against the door. I even cracked it open a bit, sticking my head out into the cold night air. But the street was dead quiet, no cars, no footsteps, nothing. That's when the knocking started hard, fast bangs that made the whole frame shake. I slammed the door shut and locked it, my hands shaking so bad I dropped the keys. I tried looking out the window next to the door, but the glass is so warped, it just distorted everything into shadows. I couldn't shake this feeling that someone was still out there, watching me fumble around like an idiot. I turned off the TV, suddenly hyper-aware of every little sound, the hum of the fridge, the drip of the kitchen faucet I keep forgetting to fix. I told myself I was overreacting, that I'd laugh about it later, but I couldn't sit back down. I ended up grabbing a beer and pacing around, waiting for my nerves to chill out. By the time I finally crashed in bed, it was almost 2 a.m., and I was still half convinced I'd imagined the whole thing. I don't even remember falling asleep, but I must have, because I woke up to this weird noise, like a soft shuffle, almost like socks sliding across the floor. My room was pitch black, the only light coming from the faint glow of the street lamp sneaking through the blinds. I lay there, frozen, trying to figure out if I'd dreamed it. The house has always made noises, creaks and pops from the old wood settling, but this was different, closer. My bed's this rickety thing with a low frame shoved against the wall in the corner of the room, and I swear I could feel the air shift, like something was moving nearby. I held my breath, straining to listen, and there it was again, a slow, deliberate scrape coming from right under me. My heart started pounding so loud I thought it'd give me away. I didn't want to move, didn't want to look, but I couldn't just lie there pretending it was nothing. The house felt alive in the worst way, like those warped walls and creaky floors were hiding something I wasn't supposed to see. I kept telling myself it was a rat or the wind, but deep down, I knew it wasn't. I don't know how long I stayed like that, just staring at the ceiling, every muscle locked up tight. Then I felt a faint thud, like something bumped the underside of the bed. My whole body went cold, and I swear I stopped breathing. I couldn't take it anymore. I had to know. I leaned over the edge, real slow, peering into the shadows under the frame. That's when I saw him, a guy, curled up under there, his face half hidden in the dark. He was dressed in this dirty black hoodie, and he was moving, sliding out inch by inch like some kind of animal. I couldn't scream, couldn't even blink, just watched as he crawled out and stood up right next to me, so close I could hear his breathing, raspy and uneven. The room smelled like sweat and something metallic now, and the house felt smaller, like it was pressing in on us. He didn't say anything, didn't even look at me, just stood there, head tilted, listening to me try not to lose it. I kept thinking the floorboards would groan under him, but they didn't. It was like the house was holding its breath too. I don't know how long he stood there, felt like forever, but it was probably just a minute or two. My chest was so tight I thought I'd pass out, and all I could hear was his breathing mixing with mine, like some messed up rhythm. The guy didn't move much, just swayed a little, his head still cocked like he was studying me. I kept waiting for him to do something, yell, grab me, anything, but he didn't. Then, real slow, he backed up toward the door, his boots scuffing the floor so quiet it barely registered. I couldn't see his face clear enough to make out details, just a pale blur under that hood. But his eyes caught the light for a split second, dark and empty, like holes. The house seemed to shift with him. The walls creaked like they were letting him go. When he slipped out of the room, I heard the hallway floor groan once, then nothing. It was like he melted into the shadows of the house, and I was left lying there, soaked in sweat, wondering if I'd hallucinated the whole thing. But that smell, sweat, and metal, it lingered, heavy in the air. I didn't move for what felt like hours, just staring at the open doorway, waiting for him to come back. My phone was on the nightstand, maybe 3 feet away, but reaching for it felt impossible. Like, if I moved, he'd know. The house was dead silent now. No wind, no creaks, nothing, just this thick, suffocating stillness. I kept replaying it in my head. The shuffle, the thud, him crawling out from under my bed like he'd been there all along. How long had he been down there? Was he in the house when I got home? Hiding in the dark corners I never checked. The place has all these weird nooks, crooked closets, a crawl space under the stairs I've never opened. I started imagining him squeezed in there, waiting for me to fall asleep. My skin was crawling, and every shadow in the room looked like it was moving. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't listen. All I could do was lie there, trapped in my own bed, in my own creepy house. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. Had to do something. My hands were shaking like crazy, but I grabbed my phone and dialed 911, whispering so quiet I wasn't even sure they'd hear me. I kept my eyes glued to the doorway, expecting that guy to come charging back in any second. The operator picked up, and I just blurted it all out. Someone was in my house, under my bed, and now he was gone, but I didn't know where. She told me to stay put, that cops were on the way, but that didn't help the panic clawing at my throat. I could still feel him in the house, like his presence was stuck in the walls or something. The old place has this way of soaking up bad vibes. Every scuff on the floor, every scratch on the paint feels like it's got a story. And now this. I kept hearing that shuffle in my head, picturing him sliding around in the dark, maybe still down the hall or behind the kitchen door. The house felt wrong, like it was hiding him from me. I pulled the blanket up to my chin, like that'd do anything, and waited. The cop showed up maybe 10 minutes later. I saw the red and blue lights flashing through the blinds. Cutting through the dark, I bolted out of bed and ran downstairs, almost tripping over the uneven steps. The front door was still locked, deadbolt and all, which made no sense. I let them in, 2 officers with flashlights, and tried to explain what happened without sounding like I'd lost it. They searched everywhere under the bed, in the closets, even that creepy crawl space I hate. Nothing. No footprints. No broken windows, not a single sign anyone had been there. One of them asked if I'd been drinking, and I showed him the 1 beer can from earlier, but I could tell he didn't buy it. The house looked normal under their lights, just old and worn out, but I knew what I saw. That smell was still faint, clinging to the air like a ghost. They told me to call if anything else happened, and left me standing in the living room, staring at the stairs like they'd swallow me if I went back up. After the cops left, I couldn't go back to my room, not a chance. I grabbed a blanket and camped out on the couch downstairs, keeping every light in the house on. The place felt different now, like it wasn't mine anymore. Those creaky floors, the chipped paint on the walls, the way the shadows stretched too long in the corners, it all seemed to be watching me. I kept my phone in my hand, volume up, just in case, but the silence was deafening. Every once in a while, I'd think I heard something, a faint tap or a rustle, but when I'd sit up and listen, it'd stop. I started wondering if the house itself was messing with me, like it let that guy in and then covered for him. I know that sounds crazy, but you don't live in a place this old without feeling like it's got a mind of its own. I kept picturing him under the bed, his raspy breathing, those empty eyes. Sleep wasn't happening. I just sat there, heart racing, waiting for the sun to come up. By morning, the house didn't feel any safer. The light coming through those rattly windows was gray and weak, making everything look washed out and eerie. I checked under the bed again myself, half expecting to see him curled up there like nothing happened. But it was empty, just dust and a couple of socks I'd lost. I walked around, looking for anything out of place, but it was like he'd never been there. The front door was still locked, the windows too, and I couldn't figure out how he'd gotten in or out. That's when I noticed the crawl space door in the hall was shut tight. But there was this thin scratch on the frame I'd never seen before, like something sharp dragged across it. My stomach dropped, and I backed away, not even brave enough to open it. The house was quiet again, back to its usual groans and drips, like whatever happened was over. But I couldn't shake the feeling that he'd left something behind. Not a thing, but a mark, like he'd stained the place. I don't know if he's gone for good or if he's just waiting. I ended up crashing at a friend's place. That DI couldn't stay in the house anymore. Not after that. I packed a bag, locked everything up, and got out of there before noon. Driving away, I kept looking in the rearview mirror, half expecting to see that guy standing on the porch or peeking out a window. But it was just the house, sagging and silent like always. My friend thinks I'm overreacting. Says it was probably a nightmare or some squatter who bolted. But he didn't see those eyes or feel how wrong the air got. I keep going over it, how he got in, how he got out, why he didn't do anything but stand there. The house has always been off, with its weird smells and random noises, but now it's like it's tainted. I don't know if I'll go back when my roommate gets home next week. Every time I think about sleeping there again, I hear that shuffle under the bed, and my skin goes cold all over again. It's been a couple hours since I left, and I'm still jumpy as hell typing this out. The weirdest part, it just stopped like 1 minute the house was alive with whatever that was, and then it wasn't. No more knocks, no more shuffles, just nothing. I can't explain it, and that's what's eating at me the most. Was he real, or did the house pull some trick on me? I've read about places holding on to bad energy, and this one's old enough to have seen some stuff, but I never thought I'd be the one dealing with it. I'm scared to dig into it, scared to ask around about who lived there before us. All I know is I'm not stepping foot back in there alone, and even then, I'll never trust that place again. If anyone's got advice or hell, if you've been through something like this, tell me, because I'm still freaking out, and I don't know what to do with this. Story 2. The anonymous caller. I've never been the kind of person to scare easily. I grew up watching horror movies, reading creepy stories online, and laughing at those ghost hunting shows. But what happened that night in my house in San Marcos, there's no laughing that off. It wasn't just something I saw or heard. It was something I felt deep in my bones, like an instinct kicking in, warning me that something was seriously wrong. My roommates were out of town, so I had the whole place to myself. I remember thinking how nice it would be to have a quiet night order, some takeout, maybe watch a movie. But that peaceful feeling didn't last long. Around 9 p.m., I got up to grab a drink from the kitchen, and that's when I felt it. This weird, crawling sensation, like someone was watching me. I shook it off at first, telling myself I was just being paranoid. But then I looked toward the window. At first, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me. There was a figure standing just beyond the glow of the streetlight, completely still. No movement, no sound, just a silhouette that seemed to be staring directly at me. I blinked, and for a split second, I convinced myself it was a tree or a shadow from a parked car. But then I looked again. It was gone. Just gone. No footsteps, no sound of anyone walking away, nothing. My heart started racing. But I tried to be rational. Maybe it was just my imagination, or maybe some random person walking by. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. I locked all the doors, pulled the blinds shut, and tried to distract myself with my phone. That's when it rang. I didn't recognize the number. No caller ID. Normally, I'd just ignore it, but something about the timing made my stomach tighten. I answered, hesitating at first. There was nothing, just silence. Then, the faintest sound of breathing, slow, deliberate. My skin prickled. "Hello," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. No response, just more breathing, dragging out the silence between us. After a few more seconds, the call disconnected. I stared at my phone, heart pounding. Maybe a wrong number, a prank. But as soon as I tried to shake it off, my phone rang again. Same number. This time, I didn't say anything. I just listened. And then, in the lowest whisper, I heard my name, Peter. I froze. My entire body went cold. The way they said it wasn't like a question. like someone unsure if they had the right number. It was like they knew me. I hung up immediately and threw my phone on the couch like it was contaminated. My mind was racing. Who the hell would do something like this? My roommates weren't around, and none of my friends were the type to pull weird, creepy pranks, I told myself. It was probably just some random idiot messing with me. But then my phone buzzed again. A text message. One single line. Nice car, 2016 Honda Civic, right? I felt a rush of adrenaline so strong that I almost dropped my phone. My hands were slick with sweat. I hadn't told anyone I got a new car, not online, not even in casual conversation. My mind scrambled for explanations, but none of them made sense. I bolted to the window, peeling the blinds open just enough to look outside. The street was empty. No movement, no sign of anyone nearby. But that only made it worse. Whoever was doing this didn't need to see my car right now. They already knew. Another text came through. Your mom's maiden name is Foster, right? I swear my vision blurred for a second. That wasn't just some detail someone could guess. That was personal. That was something buried in legal documents and security questions. My stomach clenched as a terrifying thought hit me who this was. They had been watching me for a long time. Before I could react, the phone rang again. Same number. My body was on autopilot at this point. I answered, gripping the phone so hard my fingers ached. Silence. Then, that whisper again, like someone speaking from the farthest corner of a dark room. Happy birthday, Peter. My breath caught in my throat. My birthday wasn't for another 3 months. I hung up and immediately called 911, pacing around the living room while the dial tone rang in my ear. The dispatcher picked up, and I stumbled through the details, my voice shaking. A stranger calling me, knowing things they shouldn't know. The figure outside my window, they took it seriously. Told me they'd trace the number and send a unit to drive by. For the first time that night, I felt like I had a grip on the situation. That was until the dispatcher called back 10 minutes later. The second I answered, I could tell something was off. The dispatcher's voice was different, sharper, more urgent. Mr. Caldwell, are you alone in the house right now? My heart nearly stopped. Yes, I said, barely getting the word out. A pause. Then, are you sure? My mouth went dry. I felt a sudden, overwhelming urge to check over my shoulder, like someone was right behind me. We traced the number. The dispatcher continued, lowering her voice. The registered address is just a few blocks away from you. My knees nearly buckled. This wasn't some scammer halfway across the country. This wasn't a random prank call. This was someone close, too close. I stammered something. I don't even remember what, but before I could process any of it, I heard a noise inside the house. It was soft, barely noticeable, like the creak of a floorboard under careful steps. The air in the room felt heavier, thicker. I wanted to believe it was just my mind playing tricks on me, that the stress was making me hear things. But then it came again, closer. My body locked up. My house wasn't big if someone else was inside. They were either in the kitchen or the hallway leading to my bedroom. I moved as quietly as I could, gripping my phone like it was some kind of weapon. The dispatcher was still talking, but I barely heard her over the sound of my own pulse hammering in my ears. The worst part, every instinct in my body was telling me I wasn't alone anymore. I forced myself to move, step by step, toward the hallway. My whole body felt wired, like any sudden movement would set off some invisible alarm. I kept the phone to my ear, but I wasn't really hearing anything the dispatcher was saying anymore. My focus was on the house, the silence, the air, the way my own breath felt too loud. And then, just as I reached the hallway entrance, I saw it. My bedroom door. It was open. I never leave it open. I know that for a fact. I always close it before bed, and I definitely closed it before coming into the living room. My stomach dropped. Someone had been inside my room. Maybe they were still inside. The air felt thick, heavy, charged with something I couldn't describe. My legs didn't want to move forward, but I had to see. I had to know. I crept forward, heart pounding so hard it hurt. I reached the doorway and, with one deep breath, flicked on the light. Empty. My room looked normal. My bed was made, my desk untouched, my closet door closed. But something felt wrong, off, like the energy of the room had shifted in a way I couldn't explain. Then, my phone buzzed again. Another text. Why'd you call the cops, Peter? My blood went ice cold. I whipped around, scanning the room, my breath shallow. I was done playing games. I sprinted back to the living room, yanked open the front door, and ran outside, straight into the night. I didn't care if I looked crazy. I just needed to be out of that house. The dispatcher was still on the line, telling me to stay put. The cops were almost there. But at that moment, I wasn't sure if even the police could make me feel safe again. I stood in my driveway, my breath coming in short, uneven bursts. The street was eerily quiet. No cars, no people, just the distant hum of a street lamp buzzing overhead. My hands were shaking so bad I could barely hold my phone. The cops were on their way, but every second felt like an eternity. I kept glancing at my house, expecting to see something movement behind the blinds, a shadow shifting in the doorway, but nothing happened. That's what made it worse. If someone had broken in, they should be leaving, running, but the house was just still, like it was holding its breath. Then, as I was standing there, trying to convince myself I was safe outside, my phone buzzed again. Another text. Going somewhere. I felt like I was going to be sick. My head snapped up, eyes darting to every possible hiding spot around me. The bushes, the alleyway, the dark corners where the streetlights didn't reach. But I didn't see anyone. The realization hit me like a punch to the gut. Whoever this was, they weren't just messing with me inside the house. They were watching me right now. I backed away from the driveway, my legs feeling like lead. And then, just as I reached the edge of the street, I heard it. A click. The sound of my front door unlocking. My locked front door. The handle turned, slow and deliberate, and the door eased open just an inch. Just enough to see the darkness beyond it. I wanted to scream, to run, but my body wouldn't move. That's when the sirens finally broke the silence. The second I saw the red and blue lights reflecting off the houses, my body finally snapped out of its paralysis. I turned and ran straight toward the approaching police car, waving my arms like a lunatic. The officers barely had time to step out before I was already shouting at them, trying to explain everything at once. The calls, the texts, the figure outside, the door unlocking on its own. One of them stayed with me, while the other drew his weapon and approached the house. I stood there, my chest heaving, watching as he disappeared inside. A minute passed, then two. Then I saw his flashlight beam moving through the windows, sweeping over the walls, the furniture. Finally, he came back out, shaking his head. Nobody's inside. I wanted to argue, but the words caught in my throat. How? I heard that door unlock. I saw it open. The officer with me was already on his radio, checking on the trace they had done earlier. I kept staring at my house, feeling this overwhelming urge to tell them to check again. Then my phone buzzed. I almost didn't want to look, but I forced myself to. Another text. Told you it was just a prank. And then, seconds later, a call. This time, when I answered, there was no whispering, just a voice I knew all too well. Dude, chill. It was just a joke. Aaron, my best friend, the guy I'd known since middle school. I don't remember what I said. I think I just started yelling, cursing, demanding answers. But what he said next is what still keeps me up at night. I was never inside your house. Man, I was never even near it. The cops tracked the number back to Aaron's house just a few blocks away. He swore up and down it was just a prank, that he found my personal info online, that he thought it would be funny to mess with me while I was home alone. But no matter how much he tried to laugh it off, I could tell he was shaken too. And here's the thing. If it was just Aaron messing with me, then who the hell was standing outside my window? Who unlocked my door? Who or what was inside my house that night? I never got an answer. And honestly, I don't think I ever want one. Story 3. The mysterious package. I moved into that little rental house in Tempe, Arizona, back in 2016. It wasn't anything special, just a one-bedroom place with thin walls, old carpet, and a tiny fenced yard. The kind of house you rent when you're young, broke, and don't care much about the details. My neighbors were quiet, mostly students or older folks who kept to themselves. I never had issues there until the day I found that package on my doorstep. No name, no postage, just a plain brown box sitting there like it had dropped out of nowhere. At first I thought it was a mistake, maybe something meant for a neighbor. But when I picked it up, I felt this weird sense of unease, like I already knew, deep down, that opening it was a bad idea. Inside, there was a set of keys on a cheap metal ring, maybe 10 or 12 of them, all different sizes. Some looked new, some looked ancient. But the thing that really made my stomach drop was the Polaroid photo. It was my house, taken from across the street. And it wasn't old, it was from the day before. I could tell because my car was parked exactly as it had been when I came home from work. Tucked in with the keys in the photo was a tiny yellowed piece of paper with 4 words. Deliver at 8 p.m., no explanation. No sender, just that. I remember standing there in my kitchen, staring at the note, feeling this deep, crawling dread in my gut. Deliver what? To who? Or worse, was I supposed to deliver myself? I sat at my kitchen table for over an hour, just staring at the box, the keys, the note. My mind kept cycling through possibilities, but none of them made sense. Was this some kind of joke? A mistake? But the photo that was deliberate. Someone had stood across the street, pointed a camera at my house, and taken that picture. I even checked my phone for the timestamp on a photo I had taken that same day, just to confirm. The lighting, the shadows, it was undeniable. That picture had been taken the day before. The idea that someone had been watching my house, close enough to photograph it, made my skin crawl. At some point, I started testing the keys, just to see if they fit anything in my house. None of them matched my front door, my back door, or the flimsy shed out back. But when I tried one of the older looking ones on the hallway closet, I felt resistance, like it wanted to turn, but was just slightly off. That made no sense. I'd been living there for months, and I'd always used a basic brass key for that door. Where the hell did this other key come from? My heart was pounding now. I felt like I had just touched something I wasn't supposed to. Like the moment I tried that key, I had somehow stepped into a situation that I didn't understand, didn't want to. The feeling of wrongness only grew stronger. I pulled the key out immediately, my hands slightly shaking, and took a step back from the closet like it might burst open on its own. I couldn't explain it, but I suddenly felt like I wasn't alone in the house anymore. It wasn't a noise, or a shadow, or anything obvious, just this suffocating awareness. Like something was standing right behind me, just out of sight. I forced myself to turn around. Nothing. Just my empty living room, the curtains slightly swaying from the AC kicking on. But I wasn't convinced. I grabbed the box, the keys, and the note and shoved them all into a drawer. Out of sight, out of mind. By the time evening rolled around, I was actively trying to convince myself that I was overreacting. I ordered takeout, watched TV, and kept my mind off it. But as 8 p.m. approached, that gnawing dread returned. I couldn't stop glancing at the clock, counting down the minutes, my pulse quickening with every glance. When the time finally hit 8 p.m., exactly, I froze. Nothing happened at first. No knocks, no sounds, no movement outside. I let out a shaky breath, feeling stupid for getting so worked up. But then, just as I was about to laugh, Offie heard it. A single, deliberate sound from inside the house. Not a knock, not a creak. It was the distinct click of a lock turning. The sound came from the hallway closet, the same one I had tested the key on earlier. My whole body went rigid, my breath caught in my throat. I wanted to believe I had imagined it, but deep down, I knew I hadn't. It was too clear, too intentional. Slowly, I turned my head toward the hallway. The closet door was shut, just as I had left it, but something was different. The air felt heavy, like the pressure in the house had shifted. The TV in the background suddenly felt too loud, like it was covering something up. I reached for my phone, ready to call someone, anyone, but then I heard another noise. This time it was softer, but even more chilling. The faintest scrape of something moving inside the closet. I didn't want to get closer. Every instinct was screaming at me to get out of the house, but I couldn't move. My feet felt cemented to the floor. Then, before I could even process my next move, the closet door handle rattled just once, like someone testing it from the inside. My stomach dropped. There was no way. I had lived alone for months. I had locked my doors. There was no other entrance to that closet except from where I stood. But something was in there, and worse, it was trying to get out. My body finally snapped out of its frozen state, and I took a shaky step backward. My heart was hammering so hard I could feel it in my throat. I wanted to tell myself it was just the house settling, just some stupid trick of my own paranoia. But I couldn't ignore the reality of what had just happened. That handle had moved. Something had moved it. I grabbed the nearest thing I could find, a heavy glass from the coffee table. Like that would do anything against whatever was in there. For a long moment, I just stood there, staring at the door, waiting for another sound, another sign that I wasn't losing my mind. Then, without warning, the closet door creaked open an inch. I didn't see anything inside, just a sliver of darkness, deeper than the dim light of my hallway should have allowed. The air that seeped out was colder than the rest of the house, carrying a faint, musty scent that didn't belong. My breath hitched. I had left that door shut. I was sure of it. I wanted to run, but I also couldn't look away. My brain was screaming at me to rationalize, to find some logical reason for what I was seeing. But then, as I stood there, that tiny gap in the doorway widened slowly, deliberately, like someone on the other side was pushing it open just enough to see me. That was it. That was the moment I lost it. I turned and bolted straight for the front door, barely remembering to grab my keys on the way out. I didn't stop until I was outside, standing in my driveway, gulping in the warm Arizona air like I had just surfaced from drowning. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely unlock my car. I wasn't planning on staying to see what happened next. I just needed to get away from that house, from that closet, from whatever had been inside. But as I fumbled with my car door, I made the mistake of looking back. Through the living room window, I could see into the hallway right to where the closet door had been. And that's when I saw it. The door was open now, fully open. And in that gaping darkness, just beyond where the hallway light reached, there was something standing there. I couldn't see details, just a shape doll, motionless, watching. My stomach twisted, and I felt an icy wave of pure, primal fear unlike anything I had ever known. I got in my car, locked the doors, and drove. I didn't care where, I just drove. I didn't stop driving for a long time. I just kept going, hands locked on the wheel, my mind racing with everything I had just seen. I ended up in a Walmart parking lot, sitting under the fluorescent lights like they could somehow chase away the sickening fear twisting in my gut. I didn't know what to do. Call the cops. And say what? Hey, there's a thing in my hallway closet. They had already dismissed me once about the package. They'd just tell me I was imagining things. After a couple of hours, I finally worked up the nerve to go back. I don't know why. Maybe some stubborn part of me refused to let whatever that was scare me out of my own house. Maybe I was just hoping, praying that I'd find everything exactly how I left it, that my brain had played some cruel trick on me. When I pulled into my driveway, the house was completely still. No signs of movement, no shadowy figures in the window. I sat there for a while, just staring at the front door, half expecting it to swing open on its own. But it didn't. The only thing out of place was the package. It was gone. Not in the drawer where I had stuffed it. Not anywhere. Just gone. I moved out 2 months later. Nothing else ever happened. At least not that I noticed. But I never stopped thinking about that night. About the closet, the keys, the note, and the worst part? I still don't know what was supposed to happen at 8 p.m. that night. I don't know who left that package or who it was really meant for. But every once in a while, I catch myself wondering, what if I had stayed? What if I had done what the note said? And worst of all, what if whatever was inside that closet wasn't locked in? What if it was locked out?